Planning and Development Committee meeting on March 15th. Counselor Andrus?
Here.
Counselor Gwaltney?
Here.
Counselor Wolverton?
Here.
Counselor Sims?
Here.
And Counselor Nelms.
Here.
You got a quorum, everybody's here.
First of all, we are only 8 minutes late. That's impressive, so thanks, everybody. Before we get started, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes, dispense of the reading and approve of the minutes. Second. Okay, motion from Counselor Gwaltney, second from Counselor Nelms. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, 160115, update on past, present, and future sidewalk projects. Greg Cobb. We heard from that at the Finance Committee, and so we will continue to carry this item over. 300619, request to consider ordinance to govern appearance of small cell antennas. Councilor Brett Thames. Councilor Gwaltney.
I would like to carry this over once again. I made some progress this week, but then last week, I'm sorry, but then travel got in my way. I'll work with Mr. Kendrick and get some standards set up in the next couple weeks.
Okay, we'll
Not
continue.
guaranteeing it's going to happen this week.
Okay, we'll continue to carry that over. And if you want to send it over to the table, we can do that too.
Give me one more committee meeting,
But you got it.
and then we
No
can
worries.
table it. One more. That's it. Just one more chance. Please,
No
one more
worries.
chance, Ms. Chair.
Okay. 110121, request for consideration for city murals with Councilor Andrus, myself, and former Planning Commission Chair Jeff Foster. So we heard from lots and lots and lots of folks today, and I want to thank everybody. I first want to say that I had done a great job of replying to everybody until about halfway through the day, and then the volume substantially increased, and I thought we had a tennis match. I'm the snack mom for the tennis team at the high school, and so I had to, right as I was, anyway, we ended up getting rained out, but I didn't know it until I was in the middle of Target. So I did not get to reply. There's many, many emails sitting in my inbox that I have not been able to reply to, and I apologize, but I do want to thank everybody. This has been a interesting response to the topic. Let me give you a little bit of history. I know we've covered this. Let me just say to everybody, we have been talking about this in our committee for several weeks, for hours on end. We've covered every aspect of this. This came about for two reasons. One, we were in I'm now on the Planning Commission. We were in a Planning Commission meeting in December. Right now, murals are not covered under, we adopted a new sign ordinance last year. Murals are not covered under that. I was not here during the You Are Beautiful situation. I was not here during the Cracker Barrel rooster situation. So I haven't maneuvered these. I've heard so much about them, but I was not here during any of that. The very irony is that I, right now, at this very moment, am working on a mural at the Shades Cahaba Tunnel that I actually started 2 years ago, and it's city property, and I put it on the agenda 2 years ago. I first went to Lisa Moore Smith, or Lisa Holland now, at Shades Cahaba and asked her interest in taking her art students and doing something in the tunnel. And we met with Dr. Lowry, and once they said that was something they would definitely be interested in doing, I brought it to City Council. I put it on the agenda. We talked about it in committee, and then we approved paying a little bit of money for paints, and we did some sandblasting. Thank you, Berkeley, and Wyatt was very involved with that too, and I want to thank both of them for the support of that. And then COVID happened, so nothing happened for a year, of course, and so then we got started up again in the fall. And so at this very moment, I am sponsoring a mural in the Shades Cahaba Tunnel, and the response to that has been fabulous. I haven't had any negative responses at all. It's the Shades Cahaba Way, and then inside the tunnel is going to be the Homewood City skyline with all the iconic parts of Homewood, which is going to be great. So we're excited about that. And also at this very moment, the Homewood Life magazine has murals on its cover. So this is a very timely topic. And so to go back to last year, we enacted a new sign ordinance. Murals were not included. I am now on the Planning Commission. In December, we had what was considered a sign, what was possibly a mural. This was the Welcome to Westwood Loves You, and it came to the Planning Commission.
Which is why
Yeah.
it's considered a sign, not a mural.
Okay, so it came to the Planning Commission, and during that discussion of that meeting, which is online, so I invite everyone to go to the city website and go to the Planning Commission meeting in December, we discussed And we denied it because we felt like we decided in that meeting that we were going to work on something citywide because West Homewood and Homewood have slightly different zoning ordinances, and so we decided that we wanted something that would cover all of the city. And at that same time, which was in December, I met with someone on the fourth floor. Our fourth floor is our zoning and engineering department. I know I've been using that term fourth floor, and folks didn't know exactly what I was saying. Someone in the zoning department asked me to pick this up because she was worried that the city had some risk and some exposure and wanted us to take this up as an issue. So I brought it to President Wyatt and, just said this is something that we should look at, deliberate, and he left it, he approved it, left it up to me, but I now put it on the agenda. So that's how we got here. And so I want to say that I know this has been an ugly process, I would call it, in the last few days. But this is how we deliberate. I mean, this is how we do things. We are not a homogeneous city. We have people of, there was at one point in time when I was for sure this is the way this was going to go, and now I am completely on the other side. I've heard from the majority of people on the other side. I'm not saying I know how it's going to go. I'm just saying at one point in time I'd only heard one side of the issue. I can tell you now I have heard from more people on the other side of the issue. But this is how the sausage is made, people. Right. So we are here. We've been having these conversations at length in the wide open for weeks and weeks. We are not hiding anything. We are not trying to slip anything by. We are not trying to ban things that are in existence right now. We are not painting over anything. I am here to tell you that I love where it says welcome to Homewood or welcome to Edgewood. I think everyone in this room will agree with that. So here we are. I had made some notes today. I want to see. Okay, so the issue, here's the issue. We all love public art. We all love the murals in our city. Here's the issue: regulating content and the exposure that and the risk that I was asked to take on from our zoning department. And we cannot regulate content per the Supreme Court because it is free speech. So that's the crux of the issue. I have used the expression thread the needle. Is there a way we can put a process in place that allows us to thread the needle? Is there any kind of regulation or any kind of control that we can have as a city that doesn't leave us exposed? President Wyatt gave a very impassioned speech about protecting our city, and I see that 100%, what he was saying. We don't want something ugly to happen. Like what is happening online right now is very ugly, and we do not want that to be happening on a wall in the city. So we're trying to have this productive, positive conversation, and the majority of the folks that we have heard from have been productive and positive. There has definitely been some negativity. Our family is all on social media. We all see it. Okay, so, all right, let's see. Hold on, I'm reading my notes. So the issue is content. I had a really fantastic conversation with Wyatt Pugh today, who's the head of the BEZ department, and I just wanted to let him know that as I was saying that I took this on at the request of someone in the zoning department, I did not want him to think that I was shirking any responsibility because I'm the one who put it on the agenda. And he said the definition of public art is something that the city sponsors on city property that the city maintains and controls for the enjoyment of our residents. So I thought that was a really interesting point, and it gave me a little bit of hope that maybe there's some way to get through this with some sort of process in place that the city can, be proud of something that is produced if that is the direction that we go. I will remind everybody that I cannot make motions as the chair of the committee. And I want to thank everybody for their thoughts and their engagement and their positivity and their productivity. And then I will open it up to the committee. Councilor Jones.
I'm not on your committee, but just Robert's rules.
Yes.
You can hand the gavel to another member
No.
of your committee. I'm just telling you.
Okay, I
you
do
can
know that.
hand
Okay.
it to another member, and then
Okay.
you make a motion.
Okay.
That's the only way that you can.
That I can make a motion.
Yeah, you just
Okay.
have to hand the gavel over.
Okay. Thank you.
The metaphorical gavel.
Yeah, thank you.
She-
Yeah.
I'm right,
Yes.
Mr. Kendrick, correct, Mr. Kendrick?
Yes. So,
Am I correct, Mr. Kendrick? Or are you thinking? Okay, thank you.
okay. Comments?
I'll make some comments, I
Okay.
guess. I'm a member of the committee, and like you, Councilor Andrus, have been trying to, thread the needle, I would say. we've had a lot of discussion about basically, regulating murals, but threading the needle, but you can't regulate content. So that quickly boxes us in on what we can and cannot do. I look back at the Planning Commission case and wonder, how much of that was actually, it was really, as much it was voted no on because there's an inconsistency between Citywide and West Homewood, it was also voted no because the name of Westwood regulates or relates to the building, so therefore, it relates to commercial activity, so it's not allowed under the sign ordinance. So I think y'all were wrong. Y'all are right to vote no against that because I think with that criteria in place, that was the correct decision. Looking at a lot of this, we've talked about fostering public art, and so public art to me would be, through that definition that Wyatt provided, if we had a public art program, we could maybe fund or partially fund in public-private partnership murals. And I think, that would be one avenue we've discussed to thread the needle where possibly, you ban murals, but maybe have a public program to where you can still do some. But looking at all of this, honestly, I see some issues, and I think that we can't regulate content. I think we can fix the West Homewood plan and some of the issues in it and not have to change the way things currently are citywide. So really, I lean towards wanting to just keep things as they are now, honestly. So that's my thoughts after, looking at this for a while.
Sure.
President Wyatt?
I first of all agree that whatever we should do, it should be citywide. As I understand the way that the West Homewood thing came up, it was because, the same thing you said, Mr. Sims, that because it dealt with the building and therefore was a commercial sign, then it fell under the sign ordinance, and the sign, it would be a sign variance, and the variance for West Homewood for some reason is handled different from the rest of the Homewood. It's not, just so everyone understands, it's not that murals are allowed in one place and not allowed in another. It's really the zoning ordinance in West Homewood that's, well,
This really all
this
comes
is just
down to that.
This is just another issue.
This is
with that.
West Homewood zoning ordinance.
Yeah, anyone who's dealt with it knows what I mean by that. At any rate, I agree with everything that's been said, that I don't think there's anyone up here or anywhere else that thinks that any of the murals that have been painted in Homewood are bad. They may or may not be to your liking, but I don't think anyone thinks they're bad. And I think everyone can recognize that public art and art in general is a good thing, and brings about benefits to the city. And when we talked about the last time we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, one of the things I said was that there is clearly a benefit to this art and to these murals. And I certainly see that, understand it, respect it, appreciate it. The concern that I have is simply about the risk of unregulated murals, which is a box that we didn't put ourselves in, and quite frankly, that we don't have the power to get out of. The Supreme Court has held that we, like any city, cannot regulate content. We can regulate size, we can regulate some other things, sort of objective things, but once it gets to the subjective and content, we don't have the ability to regulate that. As it stands now, the ordinances are essentially silent as to murals, which means you can make an argument that they're allowed, and it means you can make an argument that they're not allowed, which is sort of how we got in this predicament. Was that because of the silence, there was a concern amongst the Planning Commission and BEZ that there wasn't any guidance on it. So I don't want to go through my entire speech again because I don't want to waste everyone's time. But that's the concern. The concern is simply about, what happens if someone paints a mural that the city does not Big C city, Little C city, the residents do not like or some portion of the residents do not like. And there is no ability, because we cannot regulate content, if something comes up that's a problem, we don't have the ability to take it down simply because we don't like it. We can take it down if it's too big, if we set size parameters, but we cannot take it down simply because we don't like it, or we think it's divisive, or we think it's whatever. We don't get the ability to do that because of the Supreme Court ruling. In my mind, the risk of damage that can be caused by that and the divisive nature that could result from that, and quite frankly, that we have seen some of just with this issue coming up online, that risk to me outweighs the benefit of public art. Now, that being said, I think there are, like I said, I think the murals that we have, really, we've sort of dodged the bullet to this point, and like what we have. I love the project with the tunnel. And so, Ms. Andrus, when you were talking about your conversation with Mr. Pugh, I think that struck a chord, at least with me, that if there's a way to say, we as a city on city-owned property, like the tunnel or the thing at Patriot Park or whatever, if there's a way for us to sort of break that out, and if someone wants to come to us, start with, that we're not allowing them in general, but if someone wants to come to us and say, hey, comes to the city council and says, we want to paint a mural in the Chase Cobb Tunnel. I think we would need to put some regulations of some kind on them that could work out. The regulations we are allowed size-wise, whatever, things like that. But if we wanted to do that, and the city council then could review that proposal, and the city council being elected officials being the key there, were to review that proposal, that's something that I think we could consider and see if we can come up with something that works along those lines. I think when we get beyond that we just run into too many potential issues and too much risk of damage to the city itself.
Comments? Committee? Councilor Jones?
Well, I was just going to ask if we can have the committee at least send it out with
Yes,
something.
I would love that.
As opposed to just
Yes.
not making a motion at all. Like I said in the last meeting, I felt like we had talked
Yes.
through everything about this. I feel like the compromise you're talking about I think is valid, and maybe we can revisit it later, but I think that compromise is reasonable.
The compromise being city property?
Yeah, being
And
city
city
property.
accepting
Yes.
Proposals?
That's right.
Okay.
City
City council,
council,
correct,
yeah.
yeah, not city,
Yeah.
that's right, city council.
I just think in reading several comments, I just don't want there to, I want to find ways to bring our city together. And if something divisive goes up, it's going to further divide our city. And and we'll have no control over that. So I love the murals again that we have up, but I lived through the "You Are Beautiful," and I never thought that would be an offensive statement, but it was offensive to some people, and it was taken the wrong way. It was so. I'm just saying that in looking at that, I think if we can do it through city property, and I think there'll be great opportunities for different things. But that's my view. But I hope that we'll at least send it out with a positive motion, yay or nay, however, whatever we do there. Thank you.
For the record, Councilors Aliman and Wolverton, do y'all want to share with us what's going on at Patriot Park? Because this is an example of city-sponsored art
Sure. We had the West Homewood Neighborhood Association have a contest in which it asked residents to come up with a design to paint the back of the facilities at Patriot Park. We had a great response that the West Homewood Neighborhood Association did. And from those designs, Parks and Rec partnered with the WHNA and came up with a kind of design that invoked all of those, right? To come up with something that would be good for the community, right? And people are excited about it. We're excited for it to go up. But it's a good example of cooperation and getting city involvement and resident buy-in into the project. Andrew, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, it is being privately funded by the neighborhood association, so there's no, other than the Parks Board, which is separate from the city, approving the design, it's being funded by the neighborhood essentially.
And we want to make sure that, they wanted to make sure that they were in line with the city, so they worked with the Parks Board to come up with a design that was amenable and acceptable.
Could this be threading the needle? Did West Homewood thread the needle?
Could be if someone will make a motion.
Someone make a motion, please.
Well, I do have a lot to say.
Okay. Council Wilburton.
So I do want to clarify, that we did, go through the process of the new sign ordinance about a year and a half ago. We approved it. Then there were still some questions about some things, and I believe some of those questions and concerns were within the city, and whether or not we had, as you pointed out, by omitting it from the sign ordinance, whether that was allowing or disallowing. So we had the item basically put back on the agenda. We had the consultants that helped draft the ordinance to begin with come. We had members of the community come, one of which is somebody who's been part of some of the murals in town. So just further clarify, and at that meeting they clarified that we omitted it in order to allow it. And that person was there, he heard it, I heard it, it's.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm not sure that's exactly what we said, or I would have a different memory of that.
Well,
It was
I
just,
think
it was
those
just
of us-
omitted. It wasn't
Right.
omitted to approve.
Well, I think
will
those of
say
us
that
who.
There were projects that were being discussed, okay? One of them being the one in question that's been allowed and is moving forward now. So, I think we have to be fair in how we enforce things, and I question or have concerns about some of that right now, based on where we stand with it. Agree with kind of how this got brought up, discuss that with the Westwood mural. But there are a lot of things in the city that we have ordinances for. Building specifications, size of houses, setbacks, colors of a house are not one, right? So my neighbor could paint a fluorescent pink house, and obviously I don't know of one in the house in the city currently. I think that something that extreme kind of weeds itself out by default. But I do know that there have been concerns for years about whether or not we have the resources as a city to regulate some of the ordinances that we already have on the books. So I guess I have a concern about adding yet another one, which in my mind is a relatively, when we're talking about murals, we're talking about paint, something that can be covered up in a matter of a couple hours, depending on the size of it, versus homes that might be constructed too large, that leave a permanent footprint and are detrimental to the city in other ways. I understand that we can't regulate content. I think that's been discussed over and over again. As I understand it, that is basically the heart of the issue right now for most here. But I will clarify and point out that we've discussed that during the sign ordinance drafting. And essentially it was because we can't regulate content, we can't regulate content on murals or on signs. So if a business owner wants to produce a lewd sign or some vulgar language, they can already do it, okay? So I just, you know, these are rational things to discuss because they're already allowed. Now, again, it comes back to size currently. You know, that's one way that you regulate a sign, that we can regulate a sign. We can't regulate the content of billboards that are around the city. There could be lewd stuff that somebody pays to put up there.
No, but we have outlawed billboards, so there are no billboards.
Right, I'm just saying the content that gets streamed or put on the billboards, that's all. I understand. No, I know about the billboards. There's history there too. But I, you know, in my heart of hearts, I also question whether or not trying to create a permanent ban on something like this would potentially open us up consequently to a lawsuit for First Amendment infringement for somebody's ability, you know, to do and express themselves. So I guess I just, I struggle with all of these things right now. And I mentioned size restriction being really, in my mind, the only mechanism that we could use if we were to try and somewhat regulate what they are, okay? And I'll get to the point here, but essentially, you know, I think there's regulation on other things in the city that we need regulation on. I think there's always a possibility of a worst case scenario with anything you do. But I overwhelmingly heard, we support murals, we support this kind of public art, we support this. And I tallied the responses that I've gotten, and it's 30 pro and 5 against. So it's very heavily cited, and that's what was sent to the committee. If something was sent publicly or privately to you and it wasn't forwarded to us, I don't have that. So, but I'll use this example because I think it's one that is legitimate and kind of outlines some of the ways that I think murals will kind of self-regulate. One is money. These things aren't cheap. You're covering, in many cases, a large area, which is not a cheap endeavor. Okay, so if somebody wants to do one, they're investing a good bit into doing so. Along with that, you have to have a canvas. You have to have a size or a space that has been either donated or asked that you do this. And then thirdly, I think just like anybody in any profession, you want your reputation, you want your business to continue and to be something that you can stand on. So if a business owner, for example, is one to go out and seek a mural, the business owner is probably going to want something that is, in their minds, fairly neutral and or help their business. And secondly, the artist that they get is probably going to want to support it privately themselves as well. I don't see artists going out there and putting up stuff that they can't get behind themselves. So all of that to say that, you know, I think those things can be worked out. I just think we're making an issue out of something that really, to many of the comments, even those 5 that said they're opposed to it, not a single one of them said, I hate the murals that I've seen in town. Every single one of them made a point of saying, I like what we have, but here's my concern. So the numbers are overwhelming to me. So that's where I am. And yeah, you can, that's fine. You're not on the committee, but I would move to just drop the item.
President
I
Wyatt.
think he can still speak even though he's not on the committee.
Yeah, but he can't grumble under the mic.
He just said he wanted to speak.
All right, I'm going to go President Wyatt and Councilor Jones. Go
Well,
ahead.
you have a motion, you need to.
Okay, I have a
you
motion.
gotta
Do I have a
deal with that
second?
first.
I'm sorry.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Wolverton to drop the item.
Second.
Is that right? Is that right? That's your motion?
Is that Ms.
Yes.
Nell's second?
Yes.
Second from Councilor Nelms.
And I'll clarify, I'm not opposed to some other partnership, but I think that's a separate issue from what we're vetting right now.
Do I need to take a vote on that?
No, I can speak to it before.
Okay, now that I have a second?
You've got a second, now I can, now
Okay.
anyone
President White.
else can speak to it. Let me just mention a couple of things, and I certainly respect Councilor Wolverton's opinion, but I think there are just a couple of things that need to be clarified. One, the same Supreme Court case that says you can't regulate content says that if you look at that case, a ban is not a violation of free speech. If you're treating everyone equally, it's not a violation of free speech. That's what the law says. So there is no legitimate argument about that.
But would it, if we were to branch out and try to create some sort of partnership within the city, would that be complicating the issue at that point?
It would be, well, it depends if you're talking about city, I don't think on city property, no. That was one of the reasons that I was saying that was might be a good way to thread the needle as opposed to what we've got now, which is clearly caused some ambiguity. Secondly, I certainly don't dispute who you heard from or what they said. I will just offer a differing opinion, or not a differing opinion, a different set of facts. I have heard from more people that want a ban than don't. I have heard from, I didn't take a count, but I have heard from a lot of people on both sides, a whole lot of people on both sides that are passionate about their position. And I'll say this, I think they all have a legitimate point, right? I don't think there's a right or wrong on this. I think we're just taking up considerations. And I don't think it matters what the numbers are as to who heard what. I think it's fairly evenly split from what I heard. I think there's a group that is very passionate about wanting a ban. I think there's a group that's passionate about wanting to leave it open for any murals anywhere. I think there are also a lot of people in between. I will tell you that a lot of the people that I heard from that were quote unquote pro-mural, and I don't know anyone that's anti-mural, but who want to leave it open for anything. Of those people, about half the emails I got said something to the effect of, I love public art, I think it's great, just make sure no one does anything bad. Which is, and other people that did it that I talked to that said, I love murals, please don't ban murals. And then when the subject during the conversation, when the subject came up of just make sure they don't do this, and then I would say, well, that's the point. We can't do that. We can't make sure that they don't do whatever it is that you don't want them to do. And so I don't think anyone is anti-mural. I don't think anyone is anti-public art. I think whether it's on this council or out in the city, I think the issue is simply, what do we do if something goes up that we don't like, whether that is tomorrow, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, whenever it is. I want everyone to understand there's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing.
Alex, can you hear me?
There is nothing that we can do about it. So I just want everyone to understand that that's where we are. I'm not saying that's a bad position for anyone to take. That's just where we are because that's what the Supreme Court has said.
Yeah.
So, at any rate, I'm not on the committee. Committee will do whatever it wants to do.
Councilor
But
Jones.
I just wanted to make that point.
Councilor Jones?
Yeah, I didn't mean to grumble under my microphone. I didn't have my microphone on, so, but I have it on now. What you're mentioning about the canvas and the cost, I vehemently disagree. We're not talking about painting the Sistine Chapel here. I mean, I'm talking about anyone can go out with a can of spray paint and put whatever. Well, what's graffiti? If someone
Graffiti
wants
is
to put
vandalism
graffiti
on property that
on
you don't own.
On property,
I mean,
we have no basis to stop it. You can call, and you might say, oh, that's not graffiti, and you'd have 9 other people out of 10 say, that is nothing but graffiti. So, you can't regulate content. So you're visualizing someone going out and saying, okay, here's my canvas, and I'm going to spend the next 10 days painting, as opposed to in the middle of the night painting, graffiti all over the place.
But if it was,
So-
it's different if it was requested and sanctioned versus not.
So so that's what I'm saying. That's the compromise I thought was good
I
to where we
agree.
we
Yes.
can regulate
Right, I agree.
where it goes and control that, as opposed to
Right.
not having any control from the city. So I just don't want to like Mr. President says here, 4 or 5 years from now, something happened that's very divisive, and we have no means to regulate it, to correct it. So that's all I'll say is, I hope we can, obviously if it's going to be dropped, if it's dropped, I guess it goes to council and we either reject it or we don't, but those were my thoughts. Thank you.
I mean, I did propose last time, like I said, the only mechanism I can think of is regulating signs like we do with signs. And that didn't seem to be met with a warm reception, or at least there was no consensus on it, so.
What about the proposal that President Wyatt made about regulating, having city properties,
I mean,
city-sponsored art?
I heard from business owners that like what's there now.
We're not taking anything away that's there now.
Correct, but they like the ability for that freedom within being a business owner. We heard from physicians, we heard from, people from all walks of, there were several artists and people, we heard from a lot of different people, and I just, again, if there were so many other people opposed, I wish they would have written, proposed that email and sent it.
I heard from a lot of people that were opposed. We did. We did.
Yeah, because
I mean, I got to-
going off of what I, and the discussions that I've had with folks over, the last couple of years, because it was obviously a concern when the discussion of the sign ordinance was being drafted about a year and a half, 2 years ago.
That's right.
There was concern then too, so.
Okay. Counselor Sims.
Oh, no, Counselor Allen, I do want to say
Oh.
something, but I think Counselor Allen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Counselor Lemon. I'm so sorry. I think I was.
Thank you.
I can't, yeah, I think I was like. doing
It's hard,
this.
I know. I do want to challenge the notion that we're conflating graffitis with murals, and one's vandalism, one is not. And we can talk about who gets to decide that, and there's legal mechanisms to do so. I think that the whole discussion has really been based on people asking permission to create art on walls by request. That's always been the conversation that we've been trying to have. So this notion of fly-by-the-night graffiti artists is not really the basis of the conversation. One. Two, I would hate for us to impinge on the ability of property owners to try to create something beautiful that contributes to their community. So I would not be for a general prohibition. I more or less agree with Andrew in terms of supporting dropping this item, because the city has done a pretty good job so far of self-regulating itself. And the few murals that have gone up have seemed to have added to our city. And I think that we have a very thoughtful community that cares about the things that it puts up and has tried to do its best, and notwithstanding roosters and whatnot, has been successful in doing so. I know that this is a passionate subject, clearly, right? And I'm respectful of everyone's opinions. I think that it's probably best to just drop it.
Counselor Nelms, did you have anything you want to add?
Not really. I think I said most of mine last time, but I appreciate all of y'all for your input and the research that you guys have put into this. I mentioned to Andy that I think we're all saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're just hearing it different out of each other's mouths, and we're all saying the same thing. That's just my opinion.
Counselor Sims, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Thanks. I was just going to add, I spoke to a couple of different cities that do have public art programs to see, what they've done, not only on public property, but also on private property with public-private partnership. It's taken a lot of things, like where the city puts forth funding, in some cases 100% for the mural to be put into place. Sometimes it's 50-50 in partnership with a private owner. And so to move forward with a public art program, I think we'd have to get to a point where we actually had funding for it, which I think, with the spending freeze right now, and also with some other things going on, with just really a lot more would need to be stood up to do that. So I would yield still to move forward with anything without having that other part, stood up to thread the needle. I don't want to cut it off and then figure out the solution to still make it happen later, because I really just don't think that there's a huge issue right now. And I'm hearing from a lot of people that more so than murals, the discussion about it has been the issue, and they just want it to kind of go away as far as the discussion goes. And from that standpoint, I've reviewed this, and I see we have amazing artists in our community who are able to put up murals that enhance the aesthetics and our surroundings, and I hope that we're continue to be able to support of what they do. That's it.
Okay.
May I ask one simple
Yes,
procedural
Councilor
question?
Botany, yes.
Mr. Kendrick, since this is currently not listed in our sign ordinance, there's no permit process?
No.
So we wouldn't even have notification
The
of-
original sign ordinance had a provision that permitted murals. It was specifically taken out at the council discussions. So to say that it wasn't included or wasn't considered is really not true.
Right, it was considered. No, I agree with that.
And it was taken out.
Right.
Because there was no agreement
Yeah,
between the council about that.
I agree. So could we do something similar to what we had with the last?
I didn't draft that ordinance. I don't know that I remember what it was. But that's not what
My question was simply, all the concerns aside, just procedurally, how do we know when these things are coming? Do we, we can require a permit for them, so at least we have, ample time to know that it's coming. I don't know, can we request in that permit process, though we're not going to sway anyone, request that they submit a copy of what's going on to the structure? Well, I'm not saying, I'm just going, I am 1,000% opposed to regulation, because that will get us sued, and that is my main goal, is to prevent the city from getting sued.
Mr. Kendrick may have a different opinion, but I don't think requiring a permit regulates it. It would just be when you say you can or can't do that. In other words, to sort of apply for a permit and say, this is what I'm going to do, I don't think changes anything, but the permit, I don't think you could deny the permit.
Sure. No, I'm not saying we should.
Yeah.
I'm just really looking for notification that it's coming.
You could require a permit, but you'd have to essentially authorize the murals in order to be able to
Sure.
permit it.
It would be essentially a pass-through.
Yeah.
But
But again, if you're going to specifically authorize an activity, every other provision of your sign ordinance has standards and regulations that gives notice to the public about what they can or can't do. In the absence of that, you can do whatever you want to.
All right, last comment.
Yeah.
Two things. I thought the compromise was a good compromise. It would at least give us some time to look at things. But if we do decide not to do anything at all, maybe we should at least look at the size. The only reason I think that is because I love murals and I like what we have in place, but I don't know that I want to see a 4- or 5-story mural in our city. Only comment.
Well, I do want to make one more comment about what President Wyatt said. If it's not explicitly listed, some consider it, banned, some consider it approved.
Let me address that.
Okay.
You have regulations in place to prohibit things. Everything not regulated is permitted. So I
There's no
disagree with
ambiguity
Mr. Wyatt about that. If it's not regulated, it's permitted. That's what regulations are. They give you standards about what you can or you can't do. The fact that there's nothing in our sign ordinance that deals with murals, in my opinion, from a purely legal standpoint, then it's not prohibited. If you don't prohibit it, then it's permitted from a legal standpoint in my mind.
That's what I remember placemakers saying, for clarifying too.
Okay.
Well, I'll just say we talked to placemakers, the three of us,
Mm-hmm.
about a month ago, and they had the opposite opinion when we talked to them. I'm not telling Mr. Kendrick he's wrong.
What was their opinion?
That there was an ambiguity when it was silent.
The ambiguity would be resolved that you could do it.
I'm not disagreeing with you. that was just so, to answer Andrew's question about placemakers, that was, if y'all tell me if you have a different memory of it, but I think that's what Susan said.
I'd be glad to talk about it.
Well, okay. Counselor Jones?
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out a way, a compromise here, because we're on opposite ends here. And if the concern is, my concern is content, your concern is
I think
freedom.
everybody's concerned, in the worst case scenario is content, sure.
But if murals can just be inserted within the sign ordinance and have to be approved by city council, that would accomplish what we're all trying to do.
If you insert it, though, you're gonna have standards like you do for every other sign that you have.
Right. And you still can't regulate the content when it comes to you.
If you gotta read it, you can't regulate it.
But it would require a
But it's like,
permit.
like what
Well,
Counselor Watling
yeah,
said, yes,
absolutely. I
require a
don't
permit, at least go.
It would
I
require a
don't
permit.
disagree with that
and
at
then
all.
We
If
would,
they met the standards, they could do what they wanted.
Correct.
If it is specifically allowed, you'll need to have standards, otherwise you can do whatever you like. That's kind of repeating myself.
I was trying to come up with something, but
But you're right. It would require a permit if it's in the sign ordinance, because all signs require a permit, except unless they're exempt. There are certain kinds that are exempt.
could murals be subject to the same regulations that our sign ordinance is? The size, if it goes over a certain size?
Sure.
That's what I originally pitched last meeting.
Size, location, those kind of things don't require you to read it to regulate it.
Okay. Well, I'm not on the committee.
I know, somebody make a motion. I have a motion and a second. Do I need to?
There is a motion, though, still.
Okay. Okay. All right. Did you hear that? What I'm hearing Counselor Jones say is adding murals to the sign ordinance. Now, we have size regulations, we have a permitting process. I know we're still not talking about content, but at least we have a process, which again, in my mind, is what I've been trying to accomplish all along. I know it's not perfect. Do we have agreement on that? And if we do, would you consider withdrawing your motion and voting on that?
I mean,
You just said you said size and
I did.
at the last meeting, and now we're saying it, and now we're
In
here.
my mind, the only, and I just kind of got the wind knocked out of me kind of response last time, so.
But here we are, a week later, 2 weeks later, and now it's on the table. Would you consider withdrawing your motion and putting that forward?
If it makes you feel any better, I still don't think size solves the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I
If
think.
y'all want to do it, that's fine. I just don't think it solves the content issue, which is
Right.
I mean,
again, it's fine if y'all want to do that. I don't think there's a problem with regulating size. I just don't think it addresses the content issue.
and, I just yield to adding another process, a permitting process, which is essentially, doesn't really regulate much, but puts more burden on our municipal staff. What's the value again of that? I mean, if we can't ultimately regulate content. So, and the city, I've spoke with a couple, they reference, basically, how do you deal with this? They're unregulated, what do you do? And, you can't regulate content, so how does it get regulated? Well, it's the court of, the public who regulates it. They police content. When a bad mural goes up, it doesn't stay up. And most people are invested in their city, to put something good up, and we have a lot of great artists. And so I really I do not see that we're in an extremely vulnerable scenario, because we have great murals so far, and I don't think we should worry about the doomsday, because if the doomsday scenario comes up, I don't think it'll stay. I think probably the doomsday mural would be less bad press than a ban on murals would be. I think that'd be more bad press than the doomsday mural.
I think you should vote
Okay,
on your motion.
we have a
But I will
motion
just say that
and a
you-
second.
You don't need a doomsday mural. I mean, we've had, somehow
Right.
"You Are Beautiful" was a problem, is my concern.
All right, we have a
I think you need to
motion.
vote.
Well,
'cause
that
you
is
got
my
no-
concern,
that's
is that
it.
we'll never get a complete consensus on,
Okay.
everybody loves this, and everybody doesn't love that.
So I cannot even remember who the second was from, Counselor Nelms. So I have a motion from Counselor Wolverton to drop the item and a second from Counselor Nelms. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. The ayes have it, 4-1, dropped. Okay. Started to say we were adjourned, but we're not, are we? Yes, to council, right? Yep. Goes out to council with a,
It'll be on the consent agenda.
yes, to drop 4-1. What's that? Okay. All right, I'm moving on. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate everybody's thoughts, and I appreciate everyone joining us, and messages and emails. And again, if I haven't gotten back to you, I will do so, and I appreciate that. Next item, 130221, request for consideration of changes to the landscaping and tree requirements, Councilors Gwaltney and Andrus. This was referred from the Planning Commission on it with a 5-0-1 favorable vote. I spoke with Amy Milam today. She's been living with it a little bit. We got some comments from Mr. Kendrick. We got some comments from Amy Milam. We are going to carry this over tonight, but we'll have a few comments about it. Let's see. I've got to change gears quickly here. Let's see. Mr. Kendrick, Amy wanted to know the $50 permit fee was struck. Was that something that you meant that it was it was left blank? Okay. She said that was something that the Planning Commission and that everyone agreed on.
You can set whatever fee.
Okay. Okay, we'll leave that in there then. She said, because she was concerned that if we struck that, it would have to go back to Planning Commission. So we will leave that as is. Okay. All right. Did anybody have any comments? I wanted to mention Counselor Sims had a really excellent suggestion, and I'd like to have everyone hear that, and then we'll make that a part of the final if y'all approve that. But go ahead, Counselor Sims.
Thanks, Councilor Andrus. Yes, so I had a couple of thoughts on revisions to the ordinance as proposed. One being that we just have a requirement that the public, have the permit displayed on site, so that if anyone has any questions about whether or not this is a permitted tree coming down, that's highly visible for the public to see and not have much concern. Like, for example, sometimes you see somebody cutting down a tree on your street, and you may ask them if they have a permit. You may get the confirmation you may need, or you may have to call, Wyatt Pugh in the building engineering zoning office. So some type of solution of displaying the permit either online or on-site would really be helpful to help residents be able to navigate this process when a tree does come down. And it seems to me like, online would be good, but again, there's more admin on the background. So I think the easiest way to do it is just to require the contractor to display the permit when cutting down the tree. So that was my recommendation. Also had a recommendation about fees, but I know, Mr. Kendrick, we're bound to what the limit of fees could be. But basically, I'm just trying to make sure that there is definitely a deterrent there for anyone who's cutting down a tree to go through the actual permit process and get approval. I had an instance recently where I asked somebody cutting down a tree if they had a permit, and they said the homeowner was supposed to take care of it. I said, could you please confirm that? And they said, yes, I will. And they cranked their chainsaw up and kept going, cutting down the tree. And then finally it was resolved because I did call Wyatt. But I'm just saying, there are situations where the residents want, more knowledge about what, if it is permitted. So that would be a good step. And also just making sure that we have a appropriate deterrent in place from, illegal tree cutting occurring where people don't follow our process.
Yeah, by law, the jurisdiction of the criminal courts in cities in Alabama are limited to $500 per fine. That's the maximum fine that can be paid.
And is that per occurrence? Like, for example, could there be a $500 fine for not getting a permit, a $500 fine per tree? How does that work?
Yeah, it could be either or both. The ordinance is drafted, requires a permit, so that'd be a technical violation. If you cut a tree without a permit, you could argue that's another one. Every tree you cut I think the ordinance provides up to every occurrence of every violation.
Yeah, I want to say we've had instances where the 500's been stacked.
I think up to 2,500 was the most that I remember us doing.
Yeah, I just remember it being stacked. I don't remember what the total was, but it was multiple trees that were cut down in violation, so it was stacked up.
Yeah, it's per occurrence.
Great, thank you. And like I said, I was just trying to make sure that, the deterrent was enough there financially for them to follow the process. If someone, homeowner naively cuts down a tree not knowing the permitting process, maybe there's a way to, appeal as has been done in the past to where it's lower if there is a hardship from that multiplier especially, but I definitely,
Well,
think
that's what's all left up to the judge in the court if there's a criminal violation.
is the appeal process.
Well, it's the judge who
Okay.
sets the fine based on the facts typically.
Okay, thank you. Well, and there's been a case recently where someone appealed the $500 fine to the council and it was denied, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But see, the problem is that it makes no sense to have a penalty above the maximum criminal violation, because who would ever pay more than they could ever be responsible for? I mean, the criminal jurisdiction of all cities in Alabama is limited to $500 per violation.
Okay, so we have a few things we need to work through on this, so we are going to carry this over. And anyone have any more comments with that? We are adjourned.